But the read right now is the passion on the left seems to be more toward that sort of Bernie Sanders thinking. Hoover Institution Research Fellow, former Romney top advisor, Lanhee Chen on that. Lanhee, we talked about this before, this notion about passion gets people out to the polls in nominating contests and even in midterm elections. Passion really gets you running over broken glass to make sure you vote. Democrats have that. We're told this year. We'll see how it pans out. And when it comes to within the Democratic Party, those on the rabid left, for want of a better term, have the edge for the party. How do you see it?
They do, Neil. I think that's right. In this primary election, I think we've seen candidates, by and large, that are farther left at least be able to make the case on the policies that they believe in. Now, I actually think this sets up quite nicely for Republicans in November, because what you're going to have is a dynamic where you've got candidates advocating for things that are out of the mainstream. They may be, to your point, in the mainstream for the Democratic activist base, but not for a country that I think is still fundamentally center-right. I think it's going to be very difficult to make the case for redistributive policies, Medicare for all. These are going to be non-starters, I think, in a general election. But in my mind, this is more a setup for 2020. 2018 is interesting, but it's more of a setup for the 2020 campaign where President Trump runs for re-election. You know,
I live in New Jersey, and we have a Democratic governor who's raised taxes on the highest echelon and corporate taxes. And yet he enjoys support among New Jersey residents who were questioned on the subject of getting a lot of stuff. They were fine with it as long as they didn't have to pay for it. They were fine, in other words, slapping it on the rich, having corporations thinking it wouldn't reverberate to them. That's all well and good. But I am wondering about the approach longer term, like in a general election, that view, and how it pans out when you ask that simple question, how will you pay for it?
And it's incumbent, Neil, upon Republicans and upon those who believe that these kinds of policies are ultimately disastrous for the fiscal health of America. It's incumbent upon folks to make the argument against these policies, because it's very alluring, Neil, if you say to someone, hey, look, you get all this stuff. It's not going to cost you anything right now. Of course, the natural human tendency is to say, yes, sign me up. But if you're there making the case, if someone is there making the case saying, look, actually, there is a longer-term cost to all of this. It's not sustainable. No one said, are they going to pay for it? We're going to kill economic growth. There's all sorts of reasons why these policies won't work. Then we're in a much better position to fend off not just these candidates, but the policy ideas that they're talking about.
But, you know, Republicans, Stephen, you're a good student of political history as well, that if you think about it, good times don't necessarily help the incumbent party. In 2014, I believe, Barack Obama had that going for him in the midterm elections, but they still lost a lot of seats because it wasn't about the economy. Of course, those are the residual effects of the health care thing and all that. But are Republicans getting a little too cocky here that they can stave off a blue wave? Or at least does it justify concern?
It does justify concern. Lanhee's right. The whole thing is about turnout, especially in midterm elections, much more than presidential elections. Right. And the Republicans don't have a positive platform. It's nice to say the economy's doing well, but the headlines drown that out. So why haven't they come up with Tax Cut 2.0? They talk about it, but let's put on the table some specific things. Your taxes are going to be cut. Here's how it's going to be done. 1, 2, 3 if you reelect us. On health care, premiums are going up in October, and so that's going to be an issue. Why don't they come up with the idea of health savings accounts?
Who do they blame those higher premium costs on?
Well, blame is going to be pretty tough because they're in charge of all three branches of government.
Right,
and so take health savings accounts. Why not have HSAs for everybody? Have something positive out there for voters can really bite into.
Lanhee, could I ask you about that? I was curious. He raised a very good point that if you're in a position right now where your premiums are going up in October and you're going to go back to Republicans and say, well, you've been bemoaning this for a long time, but last time we checked, you have the run of the table, and you're not running it very well. Could that come back to bite them, the tax cuts notwithstanding? Because I think most Americans, at least on these polls and surveys that look at the strength of the economy, prospect for their kids and graduating and finding jobs, record highs. What wins out, do you think?
Well, what we're seeing in the polling pretty clearly, at least for Democrats and independents, is a top concern about health care. So I think Steve's absolutely right that health care is going to be, it's not a sleeper issue, it's an issue that's certainly out there. And for Republicans, you know, they did have legislation that went through the House of Representatives that would expand massively access to health savings accounts. And I think that's a very good thing. But fundamentally, I think Republicans need to continue to make the argument about what a better health care system looks like. One where costs are lower, there's more transparency, people have access to more choice, because they have to be reminded that there are fundamental flaws in Obamacare. And the reason why we're seeing higher premiums, yes, Republicans are in charge. The reason they're seeing higher premiums, though, is because the law was poorly designed. And I think that case needs to continue to be made, in addition to a case about what the alternative looks like.
You know, Kevin, as he was saying that, we were rolling through some of the results, the primary results. I noticed that former Governor Peloni of Minnesota lost his primary battle. He's been very critical of Donald Trump. Donald Trump was back, and the other guy won. So what do you make of the effect of the sort of the Trump backing?
You know, I think it's pretty important that you can't dismiss President Trump's endorsement, right? Especially because his base is so behind everything he does. And it's a testament to really what's happening in the United States today, right? Who did he take out? He took out the Bushes, and he took out the Clintons. And that says something, and that's showing that the American people want change, and they still want change going into 2018. We're talking about health care. We can't afford it now. We have over $60 trillion in unfunded liabilities that are going to start to hit the balance sheet, right? I mean, we can't afford the current system, so Medicare for All system would never work.
You know, and on that and the Trump effect, if you don't mind my just keeping it to politics, do you think that Republicans would be wise to use him, keep him aggressively on the stump? It cuts both ways, you're told. But again, the majority of candidates he's supported or those who have said nice things about him, it's worked out well. What do you think?
Yeah, and no, I think that's right. There are some states where you're going to need President Trump to get over the finish line. You look at West Virginia, North Dakota, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, states that we saw last night. If President Trump is out there actively stumping and campaigning for Senate and House Republican candidates, I think it's going to work to their advantage in those states. You're not going to send them to Los Angeles. You're not going to send them to Northern California. You're not going to send them to some of these places where either there's no competitive race or there is a competitive race, but it's obvious that he's not going to be as helpful. If you focus him in places where he did well in 2016, some of these candidates are certainly going to benefit. And in fact, I think some of these candidates aren't going to win without him.
All right, Lanhee, always good stuff. Thank you very much, my friend.
Good with you, Neil.